back to the Discipline Life podcast, the place where we talk all about power differential relationships and domestic discipline. I'm Aria, and this is my husband, Coda.
Hello, everyone.
And on today's podcast, we are going to be talking about respect.
Respect.
As we were going through what we should talk about next, Coda reminded me that when we were doing the pillars of domestic discipline, we didn't really touch on respect. And respect is one of those things I feel like it's an underlying theme of all of our conversations, but it is definitely something that is foundational to really any relationship, but especially a power differential relationship. Respect plays a heavy role in the success or failure of that relationship.
Sorry, just a side note.
Absolutely.
I always think of like Cool Runnings when I think of the word respect, because that was their big thing in Cool Runnings. If you guys have seen that movie, they would get in a huddle and they put their hands together and go respect. So
Okay, I must have missed that part. I haven't watched that movie.
Yeah.
Before we really delve into the topic, though, if you are watching us on YouTube, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up if you like it. We really appreciate that. If you are not already, please do consider subscribing and click the notification bell to be notified when we upload new content. If you want early access to the podcast as well as bonus content, consider joining us on Patreon. The link to that is in the description box.
It is indeed.
So when we're talking about respect, I think one of the main things is people always think about respect going in particular one direction, the submissive partner respecting the authority of the dominant partner, the head of household. But respect really does go both ways. I think that it's important to remember as the head of household to respect the position of the submissive partner, to remember to respect her personhood, to respect her position as the one submitting, because it is natural as the submissive partner to have that idea of respect and have respect be very tangible in the day-to-day with the dominant partner. I definitely feel like as a submissive partner, I feel like everything I do has to align with the expectations and the rules, and all of that is an expression of respect. Without my respect towards my head of household, Coda, without my respecting him, our relationship would break down because I wouldn't be motivated to follow the rules, to meet the expectations, to do what I needed to do, because no amount of discipline, no amount of punishment can create an atmosphere as successful, as motivating as when I have respect and admiration towards Coda for what he does, for who he is, and that the motivation that comes from the atmosphere of respecting him creates more positive outcomes overall.
Oh, that was well said. That's the end of the podcast. No.
I was like, feel free to jump in anytime.
Well, no, I was just listening to what you had to say because I think all of those things sum up very well what you have to have from the submissive. Now, what I would say from the dominant partner, the person who is, quote unquote, without the lack of a better term, in charge, respect is something that I don't know how many of you were raised, and without chasing too many rabbits here, I was raised in a home where authority or adults were just given respect just because they were adults. Now, I don't want to, again, rabbit hole this too much, but I think this is important to bring up. And so there were a lot of adults in my life that, to a certain extent, didn't deserve the respect because they were very abusive individuals. And so there's a fine line, especially as a kid, between treating adults with disrespect because you're just acting out, or treating adults with disrespect because they haven't earned respect because they're abusive individuals. And so the reason I bring that up is because as the dominant partner, you need to earn the respect of your submissive to an extent. As the submissive, I think, and I'll give Arya a chance to like rebuttal here in a second. You need to, the submissive needs to respect their partner, but the one thing that I think can be a real big misnomer is this idea of blind respect. You just do it regardless of whether or not the dominant partner is abusive or not. And so I've worked really, really hard to make sure that I earn Arya's respect by trying to be consistent, by trying to be kind and loving, but also do things by doing those things that we've talked about already in the podcast, being trustworthy, all these kind of things. I earn her respect, and I because if I don't do those things necessarily, I could the relationship can take a turn really, really fast into disrespect.
Okay, a few things. If the dominant partner in a domestic discipline relationship could be described as abusive, then you really do need to reevaluate the dynamic first.
Well, yes,
and then
of course.
the relationship might need its own evaluation.
No, that's true, right.
But definitely stop any type of discipline dynamic if that's a word that can be equated to anyone in the relationship, but especially the dominant partner.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is using physical discipline, right?
Right.
Um,
And I hope nobody is listening is in that kind of situation. I'm talking about an extreme here.
Sure.
But
Sure. I just wanted to point that out because you did use those words, and I
Right.
felt like that was an important caveat to make.
yeah.
Um,
And like I said, I'm not trying to really pigeonhole too much and go down
Sure.
a rabbit hole that we're really not trying to go down here.
And I think
But-
that you brought up some good points with respect being earned versus given.
Right.
And I think that there is a balance there. However, there's a difference between respect and courtesy.
Good point. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
And so what I was going to say is it's not, whenever you're interacting with anyone, it's not a situation of am I respecting or disrespecting. There is this middle ground of courtesy where I'm going to be kind and I'm going to present myself in a way that is a reflection of who I am, regardless of what that other person is doing. And that's courtesy, right? And
Right.
so, let's say you have a difficult boss. Well, you can't be disrespectful to your boss without consequences.
That's true.
But if you don't respect them, you can still act courteous towards them.
Right. Right.
But when we're building relationships and we're building power differential relationships, we want to get to the point where we're not being courteous, but we really are building respect and admiration for our partners, especially as a submissive looking to the head of household, looking to the leader in the relationship. You want to get to a point of really having a deep felt respect and admiration towards them. Again, because that's going to make you more invested in following the rules and meeting expectations and trying to do everything you can and everything you're supposed to do in order to make your partner proud of you and make your partner feel happy with you.
Yeah.
I don't want to create situations where I let you down or because I feel because you have proven to me that you are worthy of my respect and admiration, I want to live up to the level of position that I have given you in my life.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so respect is earned, but it is also given. I have to decide that I am going to give you that from me.
Right.
And so you can do all of those things, but at the end of the day, I have to decide that what you're showing me, how you're treating me, who you are in our relationship is worthy of my respect, and I have to give that to you.
Yeah, no, and I'm so glad that you did a much better job clarifying what I was trying to say. Which
I
don't even
usually
think,
do.
I don't think she needed me for this podcast at all. But anyway, no, what I was going to say is you did a really good job with that. And the reason I brought up my childhood a little bit is there may be some of you who are listening both on the submissive and the dominant side of things who went through something very, very similar. And so respect is a hard thing that maybe you're working through in your relationship, and you're going, why is this so difficult? Why am I wrestling with X? Why am I wrestling with Y? And maybe it isn't a place in your relationship that because of something you went through as a child where the courtesy, even though you were a child, you weren't given courtesy because respect was just demanded whether or not you were treated with kindness or courtesy or not. And that can affect you. And again, without going too much down a rabbit hole here, that's one of the things I wanted to bring up, because that could be we've talked about roadblocks a lot that can get in the way of having a good domestic disciplined relationship.
I just realized that for myself, trust is the one thing that I guard
That
very
you guard on.
closely because of past experiences. And I just realized that for you, respect is something that you guard very closely, and
Yes.
you don't freely give respect. It
No,
takes a lot
it's
for
very
you to
difficult.
build that because of your past experiences, and you felt like there was almost a violation of
My personhood.
relationship.
Yeah, relationship. I mean, the word that you brought up that I was searching for earlier and you found it was courtesy, because there are people, there are bosses I've had in the past that I've been courteous to, because I believe people deserve to be treated with courtesy and kindness. So many times I can say courtesy in a sentence. But they've had to earn my respect because, yes, of what I've gone through as a child, and people who I was just told I needed to respect just because of who they were, and they treated me horribly. And so, yeah, as an adult, it's something I struggle with. So this is where I didn't even realize it till we started talking about this. Kind of going back to what we had talked about in a previous podcast with consistency, I realized the reason I struggle with consistency is because I struggle with respect. Not that you don't give it to me, but I don't want to be one of these people who is not courteous to who you are, and I want to earn that respect. Therefore, it's hard for me to stay consistent because there are moments where I go, oh, geez, am I violating her potentially as a person by, believe it or not, a punishment you've earned and following through with that, right?
Well, this is a good segue, but I do want to say, at least on my end, I feel like it's more disrespectful to not only me, but also our dynamic to not follow through. It
Well, sure.
undermines it
Right.
with a lack of consistency that we've talked about before. But the caveat, or not caveat, the segue here is, can you think of maybe like a checklist type of go through, what are some ways that you can, as the dominant partner, show your submissive partner respect?
Yeah.
And how can you create, like, what can you do as a dominant partner to create that
Or that
like
connection?
well,
Is that the word you're looking
make
for?
it to where your submissive partner is able to respect you? Like, what can you
Right.
do in the relationship that is worthy of respect?
Well, I think, and getting back to consistency, I think that's one of the things that I realized, wait a minute, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's been some times because I've been my lack of consistency, you've lost maybe temporarily a little bit of respect for me.
Temporarily. I mean,
Yeah, it's not a permanent thing.
it's not overall, and it's not something that lasts, but there
Right.
is the temporary, like, here we go again.
Yeah,
And that
right.
attitude is not right, and it definitely needs to be addressed when it comes up.
Right. But so I think that's an area where if you're not consistent, your partner potentially can lose some respect for you. If you're not organized in terms of, that's one reason we've talked a lot about on this podcast several times, but I'm sorry it's coming up again, a lot about communication. Because if you're not communicating with your partner and they don't know what the tier system happens to be for certain things, and so you're showing up and saying, okay, you did this, now you're going to get a spanking, and they're going, but how does that punishment fit the crime? Because, and so you can lose a lack of respect there. If they don't even know what the rules are, we've heard of situations where it's just like, okay, so I'm just going to make up the rules as I go. Well, that can cause a lack of respect from your spouse, obviously, because they don't even know what the rules are. So, not knowing what the rules are, not knowing what the punishments are for each violation of a certain rule can be a lack of communication, lack of consistency. And then that goes into, then I think if you lose respect, that's when the trust starts to get lost as well.
And can I piggyback on that
Absolutely.
and just say that the things that make me respect you, the things that you do that create respect as a response from me, are you have integrity. If you say you're going to do something, you do it.
That's a great point.
And that's in all facets of life, not just our dynamic things, but, it could be as simple as, taking out the garbage in the morning for me.
I've done that before.
There's certain things that
Yeah.
if you say you're going to do them, you do them. Or if you say, that you're going to be responsible for something in a certain area, you do that. And that's a level of integrity that creates respect. You're kind to me. Even when, maybe I've done something that deserves some harshness, you're not unfair. You're also very fair. And you're never mean. You're still very, kind is not nice. Nice is
Or
the
passive.
right. I
I
was
think
about
that
to
can be
say,
mistaken as people think, oh, if you're kind and you're being passive, and yeah, that leads to nice. And
I was like,
I hate that word, nice.
Nice is very like touchy feely, fuzzy, gooey feelings, landing on a soft cloud and everybody's happy. Kind is not always nice.
That's right.
Sometimes,
And let me add too, loving is not always nice, but it can be kind.
right. And so because you're kind and you're fair, that makes me respect you.
Yeah.
Also, I think a big thing to consider is everyone is a human person that's listening to this, most likely.
They are? Oh, wow. There's
I
no
don't-
AI bots listening.
I was about to say, I don't know if AI can listen quite yet.
Let's hope. Oh, my gosh. Don't get me started on that.
Yeah, let's not go there. But because we're all people and we're all human, we all come with our own lived experiences. And with those lived experiences come trauma.
Yes.
Most people
Yeah.
are carrying a certain amount of trauma with them into adulthood. And one thing that makes me respect you is that you understand the trauma that I am carrying. And you are very, very careful not to intentionally trigger a trauma response.
And if I accidentally do, you know, you can tell the folks listening that I'm always quick to try and apologize for that, or to say, oh, did I just do something that caused that?
And for years into our relationship, I was not as forthcoming with that communication because, again, trust is very guarded.
Yes. Right.
And that's very vulnerable. And so, but we've gotten to a point in our relationship now that if you do accidentally, you know, hit a trigger point with me, I'm able to say, hey, when you do this, this is how I react. And there's even been some times where I'm like, this is not a you problem, but this is why I'm reacting this way and I'm working on it.
Right.
But just know that I'm not holding you to changing your behavior because your response, your behavior is completely normal.
Yeah.
And I'm the
Right.
one having a problem. And sometimes I say, hey, I know that you don't mean it this way, but do you mind just responding differently?
Right.
And I can think of those things and I can be that introspective because I know that you, again, this is part of you respecting me. You respect me enough not to want to create those issues within me. And so I'm able to communicate to you and you are so receptive to that. And that makes me respect you because, and all of this comes down to you genuinely love me.
Yes, that is so true.
And I know that that seems like, oh, well, duh. But there's a lot of people that are married and in relationship that I don't know if they have that level of genuine
love.
sacrificial love
Yeah.
for their partner. And because you love me so deeply and so sacrificially, I know that you love me as if I were an extension of you. And,
I treat it that way. Yeah, absolutely.
and by hurting me or by cutting me off, it's like cutting off your own arm.
Yes. Yeah.
And because you love me to that point, I respect you so much. And that's why, I think I mentioned in a past podcast why I try my very best to meet your expectations and to follow the rules and do the things that I'm supposed to do, because when I don't, I sever part of our relationship temporarily until punishment happens and then that's restored. But I sever part of our relationship and that hurts. That hurts me. That hurts our relationship. That hurts you. And that's why we started having this dynamic, because punishment is not just a Band-Aid. I feel like, arguing, silent treatment, being mad for days, having resentments, those are all Band-Aids, right? And eventually the cut heals, but it heals a lot faster when you go in and you put stitches in it and you really facilitate that healing process. And that's punishment for us, is it takes that deep wound and it sews it up, and it does it quickly, and then we can have the restoration and move on with everything intact again.
And I'm so glad you kind of brought that up too, because then I would say that's the other reason why you do maintenance spankings. And because you want to keep that consistency going once it is healed, so that old wounds don't get potentially reopened, that they heal properly. And again, keeping that respect. I think that lack of maintenance sometimes, that's when, I don't know if this is the way for anybody's relationship, but I think Aria will tell you that sometimes if I'm not consistent enough with maintenance spankings, we lose just a little bit of respect there.
I don't know about that.
Be honest now. No, but that's why it's important.
There's a potential for me to get out of that position of submission.
Right.
And it's not that I lose respect for you. It's just that I let little annoyances be blown out of proportion a little bit easier.
Oh, I see. Right.
But that's just the way I respond. I don't know.
No, this is good for them to know. Sometimes, see, these are things, guys, that we really do shoot from the hip sometimes on the podcast, and you're hearing things literally that we haven't necessarily gone into detail before. That's one of them because, yeah, and you're really good. Like, with, she's gotten really good to where been a lot lately where I haven't felt like, oh gosh, we need a maintenance making because she's just being so disrespectful, and that hasn't been
I feel
the
like
case, but.
I've gotten to a place in our relationship and within myself that respecting you and being submissive to you is really my default
Yeah,
setting.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Now, of course, I'm human. Stresses happen. Life happens.
Life happens,
and
right.
so I'm not absolutely perfect.
We have a preteen,
Oh,
you know.
gosh.
So, no, but see, the reason obviously we bring all these things up is all of these things, if you're not careful, can affect the relationship and the amount of respect that one has for another person. And so you need to, that's why we have talked about the different pillars and things that you've heard so far about trust, about communication, about being consistent. All of these things go into the factoring whether or not sometimes respect is there.
So we have talked about the things that you do that creates an atmosphere, an environment, and a response from me of respecting you. And we've talked about the things that you do intentionally within our relationship in order to gain my respect. But on the flip side, because respect is something that you are very guarded about, and it's something that, you know, within your relationships and interactions, respect is something that needs to be earned from you. Would you say that you respect me as your wife?
Wait, this is a two-way street? Is that
It
what you're saying?
is. It is. We already
No,
said
I'm glad
that
you
too.
brought that up. Yeah.
So if you respect me as your wife, but respect is very guarded for you, what are the things that I have done? I told you what you do to earn
Yeah.
my respect. What are the things that I have done to earn your respect?
Well, and that all goes back to exactly what we've been talking about is when you obey the rules, when you do things that are even outside the rules. Sometimes there's been things that you have just done, and they're not even a rule. You've just done them to show me kindness, to show me respect. Perfect example is, we've talked about this on the podcast before. We kind of just share this yard work kind of thing because Aria will be the first to tell you.
We both hate the outside. If it wasn't for the fact that we live in an area that there's really not a whole lot of condos or apartments that you can own.
Yeah.
Most of those things are rentals, and if it wasn't for that, and if it wasn't for the fact that we have a dog that requires some outside space, we would not own a house with a yard.
No, in fact, and this is
We
not a
would
joke.
prefer a condo with like nothing.
Yeah, either that or she will tell you if I made a lot more money and I could afford it, like I would have turfed the front yard and the backyard so it's green year round and I don't have to do much maintenance. Although some of you that may be listening that own turf are going to probably be like, no, there's maintenance you got to do to that too, but not as much as you have to do with an actual lawn. Anyway, I digress. But she's right. We're not really like an outdoorsy family. But so there's not a rule that she has to do that. In fact, even though I don't like it, I really do try to make an attempt, although sometimes I get busy with school and everything else, to take care of the yard work. But Aria has been doing a lot of that lately to help me out. And that is one of those things that she always earns a lot of admiration and respect from me because I really appreciate it because I know it's something that she doesn't like doing, but she'll do it out of the loving kindness of her heart for me so that I don't have to worry about it. And also so I don't worry because I also worry about not that it just gets done too, but also that, oh man, everybody else's yard on the block looks nice. Ours looks like crap because I don't want to be that one house on the block that everybody's like, man, I wish they'd take care of the forest in the front yard, right?
Our
And
neighbors don't set that high of a
no,
standard.
no, they don't. But that it's funny. I could care less a lot of times about what people think in any area, except when it comes to my yard. I don't ask. But anyway, the point being is that when she does those little things, and then on top of that, when you do obey the rules and you do come to bed on time, when you do, is it okay? I'm telling them some of the rules here
Sure.
that we've got. Drinking your water, and I come home and you have, done the dishes and all these different kind of things. That makes me immediately go,
All the rules I haven't followed for like the last like week and a
Well,
half.
all right. To be fair, when we've been harping on consistency, I've been preaching at myself because I've been really bad in the consistency department. As I was telling her, see, this goes back to keeping respect, though. Respect can be earned, and you can keep respect going in your relationship when you confess that you've messed up. So, for example, the first thing I told her this week is that the reason I was so inconsistent with her is I was extremely inconsistent with myself. You want to talk about, like, I got all my deadlines done for work, and there's things that I'm having to do during the summer in preparation for the next school year. I got those technically done and on time, but I was still very inconsistent with myself. So when I'm inconsistent with some of the things that I have to do, then I'm very inconsistent with the things that I need to hold Arya accountable to and the rest of my family. So that's why she's saying, "Oh, have I done X, Y, and Z?" Well, we're getting back on consistency this week, but the point is I always say, hey, when you fall off the horse, don't just scrap it all. Just get back on the horse and keep going. And so that's what we've been. That's what I'm working towards. So she's giving a little bit of a joke, but that's absolutely right. I got to get back on the consistency train. But when you do those things, when you obey the rules, and you maybe go outside and do something that's not required of you, you get a lot of respect from me. And I would say the last thing is, and she knows this is big with me. It's not that I want her to act like problems aren't there. It's not that I don't want her to put on the Stedford wives face. But one of the things that really has given me respect and is when I walk through the door and I potentially have had a hard day and I'm trying to leave that at the door. And she greets me regardless of what's happened in her day with a smile, and I get a hug and a kiss and all those kind of things. That goes a long way too with getting respect, giving respect to her. And so that's why we say respect is a two-way street. It's never. I don't think respect is a give and take. It's a give. Both people need to be giving in order for respect to happen. But don't look at it as a give and take. Like, okay, if you give me respect, then I'll give you respect, kind of thing. You should try to give respect regardless. Now, again, be careful with that, because that's when we open up the can of worms we talked about earlier about we don't want abuse to start happening. But
Right, and I think that one thing that you can say is like, respect to me is a response to what the other person is doing. However, courtesy is something that you 100% choose.
that's
So
good. That's good. Kind of. I know you're going to expand on that.
I was about to say,
Yeah.
so
Don't let that slip by.
with that, you can choose to be courteous, and sometimes respect starts out as courtesy.
Yeah.
And also, you can choose to give that person the benefit of the doubt. Because there's been some times, and these are trigger points for me, where Coda has responded in a certain way, and rather than let that determine how I view him and determine the level of respect that I'm willing to give him, I have to communicate as well. But I also have to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, he didn't mean to hit that trigger point.
This is
My
good. Yeah.
response to what he just did is unbalanced because of, the my lived experiences. It's unbalanced.
Right.
um now there's sometimes where it's valid, right? For instance, I'll just explain that one of my big trigger points is frustration, and when Coda expresses frustration. And if he was legitimately expressing frustration at me, then I would lose respect because he knows that that's such a big trigger for me.
Right.
And he knows that even when he is frustrated at me, he has to express it in a different way than what you typically would, so that I don't get off the hook. I don't, I'm not ever going to, or I'm not going to be void of, that accountability. But if he's frustrated at, you know, the dog, or if he's frustrated at a situation, or if he's frustrated with some technology thing that didn't work the way it's supposed to,
Which has happened.
or even if he goes out to mow the lawn and the equipment's not working the way it's supposed to and he comes in frustrated, that can trigger that response in me. However, I have to give him the benefit of the doubt that he's not frustrated at me, because if he were, he'd be more direct. You know,
Right.
um, he one thing that really helps me respect Coda because of who I am, this is not an in general thing, this is a very specific to me thing, is that he's not passive aggressive. I know that if he were really frustrated at me, we'd have a conversation about it. And I think that the discipline dynamic really has helped develop that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You don't have to be passive aggressive. You
No.
don't have to displace frustration, because if we have a problem between us, it can be talked about, addressed, punished if necessary, and changed.
Absolutely.
And so I have had to just give you the benefit of the doubt, and I think that that's helped a lot too.
Yes. And I would say that is a two-way street as well. Give your submissive partner the benefit of the doubt. We talk a lot about, and this is something that I hesitate sometimes to use because it gets overused, kind of like nice, but positive intent. And the reason I say I'm careful with using that is you got to be careful sometimes with, because those are two things that get passed around a lot in our society. Okay, why don't you be more nice, and why don't you assume positive intent? And that can get irritating, because sometimes the reason I get irritated with those is those tend to be things sometimes that are excuses to excuse people's dumb behavior or abusive behavior. But unfortunately, or fortunately, in this situation, that's the perfect phrase to describe it, is that we both assume a positive intent from one another in these situations.
Well, and I was going to say, because I think that sometimes when we talk about things like this, where I'm communicating with you, I'm asking you to change and develop, it doesn't let me off the hook from that process either.
Sure. No, that's true.
Just because I carry a certain amount of trauma, just because I have these triggers, doesn't mean that I get to respond or react however I want.
Good point. I'm glad you brought that up.
I am
Yes, right.
constantly working on myself, working through my feelings and my traumas so that I can behave and respond more appropriately. And we've set it up to where we have rules around certain things, and we have accountability in place and punishments in place so that I can continue to develop my responses, my reactions, and my behavior in ways that make sense for me and my lived experiences. And so I feel like I respect you highly because you are willing to hear those things, be mindful of those things, and to change and develop your behavior to accommodate those things for me. And I feel like on the flip side, you have gained a lot of respect for me because I am developing, changing my behavior, not using my past experiences as an excuse to behave in certain ways.
Yes. Yeah. And I think you said it beautifully. That's exactly what I mean by positive intent is we don't use that to make excuses for our behavior, but we both work really, really hard in the areas that Aria just talked about in order to have this dynamic of respect that then flows into everything else that we do to gain that trust, to gain that consistency, to have that open line of communication. It all goes back to those things. But yeah, we don't try to make excuses to where the other person feels like, oh my gosh, like I'm having to make all these accommodations for this other person because they don't want to acknowledge where they need to make some improvements. And when both people will acknowledge that they have some areas, like you said, of maybe trauma or something, where they need to work through it so that the relationship can grow, that's when the respect happens mutually. Because you see both people working really hard and not making excuses and not trying to just say, well, let's be nice and let's be this and that, like we were just talking about, the courtesy aspect.
And I think the only thing I wanted to add before we kind of wrap up is as the head of household, as the leader, as the one in charge, you have to have a balance because yes,
Absolutely.
you can assume positive intent and you can say it because at least for myself, I never lash out in frustration or anger or anything like that without a good reason. Maybe I haven't
Yeah, I would say
slept
that's
well, or there was a stressor that happened, or, you know, I have a reason and it's very clear to see and understand where that came from. So if you just assumed positive intent and you're like, well, she wasn't really mad at me, she was mad at this. However, if I lash out, especially at you or really in general, there still has to be accountability for that. There still has to be punishment for that because that is what we've set up in our relationship as an unacceptable
Yes.
thing. Even if I have a good reason.
No, and I'm so glad you
Or
brought
an
that up
understandable
because,
reason.
yes. Like I said, I'm so glad you brought that up because
I would say there's
even
never a good reason, but an
that's why I
understandable
hesitated
reason.
to use that phrase, assuming positive intent, because it tends to be a phrase. The reason that I don't like it is because that tends to be a phrase where it just says that, somebody can just get away with whatever they want because you're assuming positive intent. And there are
Well, I
sometimes
didn't
where you
mean
go,
it.
yeah, or I didn't mean it. And there's sometimes that you want to go, look, even though I'm assuming positive intent here, this is an issue with you that you really need to fix and not use positive intent as an excuse to be a bad person or to get away with bad behavior.
Well, and as the head of
Right.
household, you are in the unique position to hold me accountable and say your behavior is bad, even if you didn't mean
You're
it.
right.
And you need to have a punishment or consequence of some kind in order to begin to develop change in that area.
Right. Right.
And so there does need to be a balance. However, just be mindful of, it takes time, especially
It does. Yeah.
when you've gone through past trauma or you're bringing a lot of things emotionally to the table. It takes a lot of time to get to that point, and it takes a lot of understanding. And so there does need to be like this delicate balance of like, okay, how far do we push accountability right now, and understand that gauge will change over time as well. 10 years ago, you would not have been able to hold me accountable to the level that you hold me accountable today.
That's so true. That's so
And
true.
so just understand that, like, creating an atmosphere where respect is a natural flowing reaction to the relationship goes a long way into helping that other person be inspired towards changing
Yes.
their behavior. But courtesy is always, even if you have to start with courtesy because you're like, I don't respect, my partner
Yet, right?
Yet.
Hopefully they'll earn that. Right.
start with courtesy,
Yes.
develop the relationship, be kind and generous. And I'm talking from the submissive side, like,
Right.
be kind, generous, and, faithful to fulfilling your responsibilities. And that you will see change in your relationship and you will start to develop respect, and then it will grow from there.
And I don't think I need to add to what you said, because I think what you just said also applies to the dominant personality. That courtesy, if you do those things, I think the other person will eventually
And honestly,
change. Because
that's
I think that's how it's worked in our
I
relationship.
was
We
about
both
to say-
have given each other courtesy, and it's turned into respect. And there's been both times where both of us have acted well towards one another and poorly towards one another, but we've given each other that courtesy that has then turned into respect.
And I was going to say, like, well before our relationship began to include a domestic discipline dynamic, I was not kind, and I was very abrasive. Not
Maybe
like
not terribly, but I understand what you're
not
saying.
like women today, but for the time, and because of how you grew up, you didn't really realize that was a huge problem.
No, because that, and that's way too much to go into.
It is. However, you were kind and courteous and faithful to fulfilling your role in our relationship, to the point where eventually I became convicted to become more submissive to you because I saw that you deserved my submission.
Exactly.
And so, we see that this can go both ways. Like, a man can just have that faithful fulfillment of his role with kindness and courtesy, and it can inspire the wife to become more submissive. A wife can be faithful to fulfill her role with kindness and courtesy, and it can inspire her husband to begin to lead.
Absolutely.
And so it can go both ways. So
that was a great way to sum that up. Good job.
I was about to say, did we sum it up? Do we
I
have
think
any
so.
final thoughts? Are we good?
I'm good if you're good.
I'm good.
I just want to, I might be jumping the gun here, but I just want to thank everybody who's subscribed to our YouTube channel. Aria comes to me, seems almost daily, if not sometimes hourly, sometimes on the weekends, and shows me how our subscriber number has been going up and up and up. And I just want to thank everybody for subscribing and for being a part. This is so cool. I just can't believe we're over 250 subscribers.
Actually,
as of right now.
As of right now, we're recording. We just hit 300.
Oh my
and
gosh!
So the response has been
gosh.
amazing. We
I
really
can't believe
appreciate
that.
you guys.
And some people, compared to a lot of other YouTube channels, people go 300, no big deal. For us, we feel like this is a big deal.
It is.
So
It's a really big deal.
We really,
for us,
really,
so
really appreciate it,
we
y'all.
do.
It's the only way I know what to say is you want to talk about respect. Thank you for subscribing. Wow, it's amazing.
So
you want to mention the Patreon and all that good
I
stuff?
was about to say, I mentioned Patreon at the top, but if you are interested in early access to these podcasts as well as bonus content, the link is down in the description box, and we really appreciate all the support that we're getting over there as well.
We've just, in consistency, we've just been a little behind. It's been part of my fault a little bit with Patreon. So, but we're fixing all of that, y'all. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, thank
we
you
are
for your
getting more
patience.
consistent with putting content up on there. Hopefully, a lot of things will be happening next week. Yeah, today's June 11th, so next weekend.
The day of this recording. You're
Yes.
probably not listening to this,
but
the day that we're recording this is June 11th.
So we do a live Q&A for our Patreons around the 15th of every month. So that's coming up in this next week. And
So how about that?
so, but yeah, that's
Don't forget to leave a comment or a question in the comment section, and then also you can send us one
through our email,
through our
which
email.
is down below, but it's thedisciplinedlifepodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, just want to always mention all that to you guys so you know how to reach us. So if you got any questions about the pillars, and especially this one today on respect, you can do that. So,
All right, guys, thanks so much.
thanks so much. Talk
Bye.
to you all later.